Alexandra Munroe, Samsung Senior Curator of Asian Art at the Guggenheim Museum. And we're standing in the Grand Army Plaza at 59th Street and 5th Avenue in New York City, where just last week Ai Weiwei's Zodiac Heads opened on a very rainy and solemn day. The Chinese zodiac is divided into 12 parts, and each part is represented by an animal, beginning with the rat, going through the dragon and tiger and snake and horse and sheep, and ending with the pig. The 24 hours of the day are also divided into 12 two-hour segments. These 12 figures that were created in realist European Jesuit style that was quite the sensation in China in the 18th century, each sprouted water from their mouths for 2 hours of each day. So anyone passing by would know the hour of the day because it corresponded to one of the 12 sections of the 24-hour day. As we know, Ai Weiwei was detained by the Chinese police on April 3rd and has not been seen or heard of since. Just this week, we passed the 37th day since his detainment, marking the time when Chinese officials should, by penal code, China's own penal code, inform the family of his whereabouts and formalize the charges against him. Unfortunately, neither of those two very important things have happened, making us all deeply concerned about Weiwei's safety. That has not deterred us, however, from calling for his release and also calling for due process, his access to due process under the Chinese rule of law, which is in fact quite enlightened in this regard, but is just not being applied in Ai Weiwei's case. Here in New York, the Guggenheim Museum led an international museums petition that is carried on the site change.org. We now have 25 institutional signatories, including the Museum of Modern Art, the Tate, the Pompidou Center, Gwangju Biennale, Documenta, and many, many other museums in America, Europe, Asia, and South America, calling for Ai Weiwei's release. I feel Ai Weiwei was not arrested for his political dissidence. He was not arrested for his art, certainly. He was arrested for his use of the internet, his Twitters and blog and Facebook postings and internet postings, his rants and his raves. That work is what has landed Weiwei in prison. And it is that work that we mourn in his detention, in his disappearance. The term multidisciplinary is an interesting way to capture the scope and complexity of Ai Weiwei's work. The son of a revolutionary poet, a child growing up in Mao's Red China, a student at the Beijing Film Academy in the first years of reform, and the founder of the first avant-garde group in post-Mao China, the Stars, in 1979. Ai Weiwei saw early on that, this is his quote, "This so-called contemporary art is not a form, but a philosophy of society." Everything about Ai Weiwei's work is social and comes into being through a strangely furtive and compassionate network of relationships. Some of them collaborations, some of them subversions, occasions, and yes, social activism. This work, Zodiac, the Zodiac Heads, Ai Weiwei worked with a traditional group of artisans to reconstruct the 12 heads of the Zodiac that were originally commissioned by the Qianlong Emperor of the Qing dynasty for his pleasure garden outside Beijing in the 18th century. In 1860, this pleasure garden and all of its wondrous sculpture, gardens, and architecture were plundered by British and French forces during the Second Opium War. And at that time, the British and French ran off with these very famous heads that had been part of a clock fountain. The 12 Zodiac heads that were originally part of the Qianlong fountain were designed by European Jesuits in the Manchu court of the Chinese dynasty of the Qing era, and came to symbolize, when they were looted, a gross humiliation to the Chinese, a symbol of nationalist humiliation. And their recovery has become a kind of battle cry for the Chinese as they have tried to hunt these scattered and lost heads and recover them and repatriate them back to China. In 2009, at the Yves Saint Laurent sale, 2 of the heads came up for sale at auction. The Chinese government sued the auction house to retrieve the heads, but was turned down. And in a sensationalist auction, a Chinese national paid record price for the 2 heads that were in the sale from the Yves Saint Laurent collection. And then, in an act of sort of patriotic, quixotic bravura, refused to pay for those heads. And they actually returned to France, to the collection. Ai Weiwei found in this constellation of political, nationalist, and artistic events so rich with irony and tragedy and nationalism and humor, and also embedded with a completely transnational story of European designed heads in a Manchu garden in the very important dynasty managed out of Beijing, that is looted by the Europeans, that comes back to Hong Kong in 2009, right after the Beijing Olympics, in a kind of wave of Chinese cultural nationalism. This is exactly the kind of story that Weiwei adores, to analyze, to find the very layers of meaning in, and to recycle as a work of conceptual art for our contemplation about the state of the world we are in today. If China wants, as we all hope, to be a leader of soft power in the world, it must understand the importance of giving artists the space for free expression. If you want your artists to be innovative, you have to be able to tolerate independent thought and creative thought. And that is what Ai Weiwei stands for us, and that's what Ai Weiwei stands for the situation in China today.